Welcome to Morbid Outdoors, the podcast that ventures deep into the shadows of the wild. Here, we unravel the mysteries of missing persons, explore spine-chilling legends, and share the most morbid stories that nature has to offer. From the depths of the dense forests to the highest mountain peaks, we'll uncover the secrets that lie hidden in the great outdoors. Join us as we navigate the eerie, the unexplained, and the terrifying. So if you dare, grab your gear and let's embark on a journey into the unknown. This is Morbid Outdoors. Hello everyone, my name is Elise and I am your host. And I just want to say that if you listen on YouTube, I have been switching with software platforms. And so my last episode was released and it was just a black screen, which normally I don't use video content, but it was not your YouTube messing up. I have been playing around with some different things. And so that's why it was a little strange on that last Haunted Parks episode. It is New Year's Eve. I'm recording this on New Year's Eve. And if you're listening, it is today. And happy 2025, everyone. I hope that you guys, if you're resolution people, I hope that you're able to set realistic resolutions. And what I find the most important about resolutions is the action. It's not really the goal itself, but it's how are you going to accomplish this resolution? What steps? And so that's super important. I think setting resolutions is fun, but I think it also is, it can be, a little detrimental, but some people do them, some people don't. I do, and I'm so excited for 2025. I feel like this is going to be a big year, and I'm so excited and I'm so grateful to have you all listening and supporting me. And once again, if you like my show, please go rate me on Apple or Spotify. I would absolutely be so appreciative of that. Anyways, thanks so much. I hope you have a great 2025, and I will, let's get this show on the road. Let's head out to the Morbid Outdoors. A group of young men road trip from Tennessee out west and arrive at a family member's dude ranch in southern Colorado. One of the young men, being a competitive runner, open water swimmer, and obstacle course racer, goes for a run near the ranch with his friend. Only one of the young men returns from that run, and 2 months later, his body is found less than 2 miles from where he was last seen. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about incidents that happened in the Rio Grande National Forest in Colorado. Now, this area is just north of New Mexico. It's very close to the New Mexico border and a very beautiful area. It's been described as one of the true undiscovered jewels of Colorado. First, let's do bad reviews. Someone's review was 1 star, and all it said was disgusting. Someone else rated it 1 star and said too many open ATV trails, hard to find peace and quiet. And our last review says, as beautiful as this place, the invasion of the ATV groups and constant noise in what should be a pristine environment for hiking and enjoying nature is no longer possible. Dust from all the ATVs lingers in a cloud and the air is now polluted. There's a majority of Texas license plates, many Oklahoma plates as well. Interestingly enough, all of this will hopefully get the Forest Service to impose strict regulations on the numbers of vehicles like ATVs. So that's obviously probably a disgruntled hiker that's mad that a lot of people are coming to use this area with their ATVs. Um, and if I sounded weird reading that, that's because some of it wasn't like the proper grammar and everything like that, but I tried my best. So let's talk about the Rio Grande National Forest. It was established July 1st, 1908. It's over 1.8 million acres, and the nearest city is Alamosa, Colorado. This national forest encompasses the San Luis Valley, which is the world's largest agricultural alpine valley, as well as one of the world's largest high deserts located around the mountains. The Rio Grande rises in the forest, and the Continental Divide runs along most of its western border. And this national forest has parts in 9 different Colorado counties. There are 4 officially designated wilderness areas lying within the Rio Grande National Forest. And according to the Köppen Climate Classification System, the Rio Grande Reservoir and this area has a warm summer humid continental climate. The hottest temperature ever recorded was 89 degrees Fahrenheit on July 6, 1989, and July 14th, 2003, while the coldest temperature recorded was -46 on December 8th, 1978. So it doesn't get like super, super hot, but it does get very, very cold. Something super cool about this national forest is that it's actually the home of the headwaters of the Rio Grande River and has the moonscape wonder of the Wheeler geologic area. So it's very diverse in how it looks and the different areas that it has. The following quote is from the National Forest Service website. Quote, "From the Sangre de Cristo to the San Juan Mountains, the jagged peaks and rushing rivers of the San Luis Valley public lands wrap themselves around this rocky mountain basin. Whether viewing the mountain scenery from roads or finding a challenge on trails, visitors discover solitude and self-reliance through uncrowded year-round recreation opportunities." End quote. So, the case we're going to be discussing today takes place in Conejos County, which is the poorest county in Colorado, and it's very sparse in terms of people. The county is larger than the state of Rhode Island and only has about 8,000 residents and no stoplights in the entire county. So, if you can just imagine this giant county that's very, very rural, and sheep graze in the sunshine there. There's a lot of agriculture, potatoes and barley are grown, and this is a major agricultural area, and all of these goods are mostly trucked north to Denver. One another thing is that there are 3 new marijuana dispensaries in the tiny town of Antonito, and that actually lures New Mexicans across the state line into Colorado. And at the time that this was written, like this information, I don't think that that had been legalized in New Mexico, but I believe now that marijuana has been legalized into New Mexico. So that might be some old info. But, before it was legalized, a lot of people from New Mexico were just hopping the border to attain that good. So, according to reporting by John Billman for Outside Online, the Rio Grande National Forest has just one full time law enforcement officer for this entire area. I mean, it's huge, and there's just one person responsible for keeping the law and investigating. And I think that is a huge point of contention in today's case because we are talking way back in 2015, a 19-year-old goes missing, and the investigation does not go how it should have. So, July 23rd, 2015 was the eve of Joseph Lloyd Keller's 19th birthday. He was a Cleveland, Tennessee native, and he'd actually been spending the summer between his freshman and sophomore years with some friends. And at the time of his disappearance, he was a Cleveland State Community College student. He was he went on a trip with his friends Colin Gwaltney and Christian Fetzner in one of their Subaru. And so they were all from Tennessee and decided to take a road trip out west to spend the summer on someone's dude ranch, like a family member's dude ranch. And the boys had done this road trip. They had an amazing time. They got to see Las Vegas, San Francisco, and the Grand Canyon. And then they headed to Joe's aunts and uncle's dude ranch called Rainbow Trout Ranch in the San Juan Mountains in southwestern Colorado. So, Joe Keller was a competitive runner, open water swimmer, and obstacle course racer, and Colin was a member of the varsity cross country team at Division 1 Tennessee Tech. And they had actually spent this entire trip going on runs together. And neither was like totally acclimatized to the altitude in this area of Colorado because the place that they were staying, the Rainbow Trout Ranch, actually was just sitting below 9,000 feet elevation. Now, Joe was a bit slower than his friend Colin, and Joe suffered from asthma when he was like 3, but sources online say he had kicked it by 12. I'm not a doctor. I don't pretend to know a lot about asthma, but it's to my understanding that that's not something you really grow out of. It's just something you learn how to manage. But if I'm wrong, please let me know in the comments because I actually thought that that was a strange thing to read online. So they got to Rainbow Trout Ranch and they wanted to go on a run. I know a lot of people that road trip, they make time for exercise. In fact, one of my sister-in-laws lived in a van for like a little over a year with her husband, and they would drive a lot and they'd be cooped up in this small space a lot. And so they made it a priority to stretch and work out. And I think that's exactly what Joe and Colin had been doing as well. So after they arrived at Rainbow Trout Ranch, they wanted to go on a run together. And the workout would be pretty routine for them. About an hour-long run, most likely along Forest Road 250, which actually bisects the ranch and continues into the national forest, that because this road kind of follows the Conejos River upstream. Joe left his phone and wallet at the ranch house, and he was wearing red running shorts, a blue trail shoes, and an Ironman watch. He was shirtless and he had very blonde hair and ripped muscles, and so he's been described as looking more like a California lifeguard than a Tennessee farm kid. At 4:30 p.m., the friends started out together on their run. Neither of the friends knew the area, but old timers will tell you that even a blind man could find his way out of the Conejos Canyon because it was easy to get in and out of. So, according to resources, it says on the south side, which would be the runner's left, cattle graze in open meadows along the river. And on the north side, there were ponderosa pines, trees that were kind of like on these sheer basalt cliffs. So, a lot of geographical points of interest, and it's kind of easy to see. You're not like in super, super thick vegetation. As the two young men jogged by the corral, one of the female wranglers at Rainbow Trout Ranch said, "Pick it up," just as like a joke thing. Everyone smiled, and Joe sprinted up the road before the two settled into their respective paces, with Colin surging ahead. So, Colin's watch had a GPS tracking thing on it, and it showed him turning right off of Forest Road 250 onto the ranch drive and snaking up behind the lodge. So he did this because he was trying to check out 3 geologic outcroppings that were called Faith, Hope, and Charity that loom over Rainbow Trout Ranch. But his run actually became more of a scramble, so he cut back down towards the road and headed upriver. There was a fly fisherman that was fishing in the area, and he says that he saw Colin about 2.5 miles up the road, but he never saw Joe. Colin never encountered his friend after he kind of set off in a pace ahead of him. He said he timed out his run at a pace that led to puking due to the altitude. So, like I said, neither of the runners were like acclimated to this high elevation, especially when you were just in San Francisco, driving Grand Canyon, um, under 9,000 feet. That can be a lot for a lot of people. So Colin finished his run after getting sick, and he actually went back to the ranch house and waited on his friend Joe. And there was no Joe. And so an hour later, an hour after him waiting, he started to worry. When Joe didn't show up for dinner, Colin and Christian drove up the road, honking and waiting for Joe to come out. They thought maybe he had sprained his ankle or maybe he'd gotten injured. So they were hoping that, honking and yelling for him, that would alert, he would be able to call out to them. But that's not what happened. And at 7:30, a small patrol of ranch hands hiked up the rock towards Faith, which was the closest geologic outcropping in this area. By 9:30, there were 35 people out looking for Joe. And Joe's uncle, David Van Berkom, he actually said about Joe, if he was hurt, he would have hurt us. He was either not conscious or not there. So no one can find Joe. You've got Joe's family out looking for him, ranch hands, his friends. They're not able to find him. And Joe's uncle says it wouldn't have been unusual for a young athlete like Joe to switch from run to scramble mode, just like his friend Colin had done trying to see those geologic outcroppings. Of course, I think we all know that when people are lost, they often try to head towards higher ground because that's a strategy. And so they kind of thought maybe because he's young, maybe if he got lost, he's going to try and go up and try to get a view of where he's at so that he can find his way back to the ranch. Around 10 p.m., the Van Berkoms called the Conejos County Sheriff's Department, and Sheriff Howard Galez and two deputies showed up around midnight. So it had been 7 hours at this point since anyone last saw Joe. And it was now Joe's birthday after midnight. And at this point, the effort was still what pros call a hasty search. If you've never heard the term hasty, I was first introduced to it in college when I worked at Philmont Scout Ranch. But it is a quick and dirty search focusing on the most logical areas. It's not a full-scale search. It's what are we checking first and why, and that's why we're doing it. It's very kind of frenzied. It's got to be fast. That's why they call it hasty. They're actually fortunate that it was a warm night and everyone still expected Joe to find his way back at daybreak with a wild story. Oh, I got hurt, I had to hunker down. Everyone's still thinking the best. And the next morning, as ranch employees and guests continued to search, Jane Van Berkom actually alerted Joe's parents, who are Zoe and Neil. And so how these people are connected, Zoe and Jane are sisters. And it's very interesting. They have a very interesting family history. So they're originally from Kenya because their family, they were British expats and they left the UK in the 70s, which is really interesting. So once Joe's parents are alerted, they actually were able to make it out to Rainbow Trout Ranch with their daughter, Hannah, less than 24 hours. They flew into Albuquerque, New Mexico, and then rented a car and drove that 3.5 hours north. Joe's immediate family arrived at 2 a.m., and in the morning at 6, that's when the professional search began. And they actually started what searchers call the point last seen, which was in the ranch's big Ponderosa Pine Gate. And a deputy fire chief from the La Plata County named Roy Vreeland and his Belgian Malinois scent dog Cayenne picked up a direction of travel which pointed to Forest Road 250. More search dogs arrived from Albuquerque, and those dogs identified different directions of travel or none at all. Additional firefighters drove over from La Plata County, And everyone on the ground were volunteers, basically. And that's very common with search and rescue. All of those people usually volunteer their time. And unfortunately, there was like nothing to go on. And in that first week, the search engaged about 15 dogs and 200 people on foot, horseback, and ATV. They even were using infrared equipped airplane from the Colorado Division of Fire Prevention and Control. Colin's brother Tanner set up a GoFundMe site that paid for a helicopter to search for 5 hours, and a volunteer flew his fixed wing aircraft in the canyon multiple times. So they were doing the most. They were really searching, trying to find Joe because everyone knew that time was of the essence. There was even a guy with a drone, and he actually buzzed the steep embankments along Highway 17 to go look. He was using his drone to get into these small places with sheer cliffs and drop offs. There was even a $10,000 reward posted for information. Like, how far could this 19-year-old shirtless kid just in running shoes get? I think a lot of people were starting to wonder if Joe even was still in the area. After a few days, actually more than a few days of searching, the volunteers began going home because, of course, they had lives and other obligations. The few who remained did interviews and followed up on leads and worked with the teams and the dogs, but the search was already kind of coming to a close. The massive absence of clues left a vacuum that kind of trapped Joe's family and kind of involved a lot of feelings. They felt anger, resentment, false hopes, and then on top of all that, there were people, and what's left from that is conspiracy theories, unfortunately. There were sightings, and then there were recantments of those sightings. There was a psychic that reached out on Facebook to report a vision that was Joe, who was west of Sedona, Arizona. There was even a theory that he'd been kidnapped in order to have his organs harvested and sold on the black market. And I can't imagine if I were in this situation and my family member was missing, and there's people saying awful, truly horrible things. I cannot imagine what Joe's family went through. So at this time, most people believed that he was not in the area or that he was taken away from the area by persons unknown. But if you think of Occam's razor, and if you're not familiar with Occam's razor, I reference it a lot in this podcast. And it's the principle that the simplest explanation is usually the correct one. So, could someone have kidnapped him? Is it possible? Yes. But is it likely? Probably not. On August 4th, 2015, after Joe had been missing for 13 days, Sheriff Galvez pulled the plug on the official search. What had begun as a very interesting story was now just a cold case. The river was already dropping quickly, and they had already searched the river extensively and rolled it out. Joe was not in the river. All the dog teams had scratched up nothing, and abandoned cabins had been searched and researched. No one could think of where Joe could be or where he was or where he even went after he was seen by that one ranch hand. They even checked pit toilets at the campgrounds. I mean, they really searched everything. And the sheriff was actually quoted as saying, quote, "We even collected bear crap. We still have it in the evidence freezer," end quote. It seems like they did a lot. But at the same time, I think Joe's family feels differently. The Keller family hired 2 private investigators who also were able to turn up nothing. One of the investigators that was hired actually told Joe's mom that he'd never had a case with less to go on, and Joe's mom said it was a waste of $800 a day. The reward was raised from $10,000 to $25,000 and then to $50,000. But Joe's uncle, David Van Berkham, said, quote, "There just isn't a sniff of anything," end quote. So 2 weeks after Joe's vanishing basically into thin air, the Alamosa County Undersheriff Sean Woods, who had been called in to assist by the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, told Joe's family about a tracker he knew named Alan Duffy. Alan was a 71-year-old surgical assistant, and he became interested in bloodhounds when his 21-year-old brother, David, disappeared in the San Gabriel Mountains in 1978. Duffy's brother was found dead of a gunshot wound 6 weeks later. Duffy had since taken his dogs to search for Jean-Benet Ramsey's neighborhood and to track stolen horses in Wyoming. So basically, calling in Duffy was a wild card. There are a lot of cases that are like this where I don't know, it's very strange. Like, I listened to another podcast and Sarah Turney has always said, like, true crime is stranger than fiction. And I agree with that. And so this man actually has this history of being involved in very high profile cases. And so they called him in to help search with his dogs. So on August 15th, Duffy loaded his 3-year-old RC, his dog, that's named after the Royal Crown Cola, um, because of he apparently has like a black and tan coat. He loaded his dog into his Jeep and drove 300 miles from Broomfield, Colorado to Rainbow Trout Ranch. A deputy gave him a scent item, which was one of Joe's used sock liners, and Duffy said, quote, "That's as good as underwear," end quote. Unfortunately, Duffy's dog did not find anything, and continued searches in August turned up nothing. Neil Keller was commuting back and forth between Tennessee and Conejos County, searching every moment that he could for his lost son. And it didn't take long until things got heated between the Keller family and the sheriff's department. In October 2015, he and the sheriff were no longer on speaking terms, and he urged the county commissioners for more help, including a dive team to search Spectacle Lake. Quote, "I, as the father of a missing boy, my only son actually, would like to have as much resources as could possibly be made available," end quote. I see this all the time in these cases. Someone goes missing and they search, and then they call it off rather quickly, and that's pretty much it. And then the family is just on their own. And it is absolutely wild to imagine what these families go through. Neil Keller was feeling the stress of having his lost son still missing. He had lost 15 pounds from hiking and scrambling in the altitude. And just before Thanksgiving, he and his brother-in-law David and a small posse spent 2 days searching the snow-covered scree west of the ranch. And if you don't know what scree is, it's like a field of loose rock, and it's very hard to navigate in. Now, this was the area that seemed most logical, but it's really, really crazy terrain, like I said. And Neil said, "We were in there because that area was likely the least searched." He would have loved to spend the long Colorado winter still searching, but he would have to wait. There's so much snow, and he eventually had to stop searching. Now, the sheriff, like I said, tensions were high between Joe's family and the sheriff, and this is what the sheriff had to say, quote, "This is an ongoing investigation for a missing person. We have no evidence, he's just missing. It looks more like that than anything else. Over 18 years old, you can run away all you want. If Joe was to call us, show me some proof he's okay, I'd close it up," end quote. But of course, as we see so often, Joe's family knew that he did not run away. Then, the next year, on Wednesday, July 6, 2016, John Rienstraw, who was a search and rescue hobbyist and endurance runner and a former offensive lineman for the Pittsburgh Steelers, he discovered Joe's body in a boulder field below a cliff band. It was a devastating discovery for John and for Joe's family, but Joe's family were happy that they had answers. Now, it appears that Joe went to the mountain peaks called Faith, Hope, and Charity That's kind of where his friend Khalid went, and these are located behind the Rainbow Trout Ranch, and it looks like he fell while he was climbing. Now, they think this because this was one of the areas that Joe was very eager to visit. Joe was a competitive athlete and a teenager, and he possibly didn't realize the dangers he would face up there. So, where was Joe's body found? Joe's body was actually found 1.7 miles as the crow flies from the ranch. Searchers had been so close to his body. And in November 2015, Neil, which is Joe's dad, and his brother in law, David, had come within several hundred yards. Quote, I regret not searching there on the 25th of July, Neil said. That's where I wish I'd started. What part of here would take a life? It's not the meadow on top, it's the cliff. End quote. They obviously had to do an autopsy, and the preliminary cause of death, according to David Francis, was blunt force trauma to the head. Joe had also suffered from a broken ankle. It appears that Joe scrambled up and then fell, perhaps the lost person behavior laid out by Professor Rescue Robert Coaster. Now, Robert has a book. I have not read it, but it is on my reading list for 2025, and I'd love to do an episode about it because he is basically like an expert on people's psyche when they are lost in the wilderness. Even though it was found that Joe had suffered from a broken ankle and blunt force trauma to the head, Joe's death remained a mystery to his mother. Quote, the events do not fit for a 1-hour run before dinner, after they had just driven 24 hours straight to get to the Rainbow Trout Ranch. So she's saying this because all the boys hadn't slept in over a day, and Joe had just split wood with his uncles, his Uncle David's 75-year-old father, Doug Van Burkum, which would have been his grandfather. Joe's mom couldn't see her son running up the canyon rim, and she is insistent that Joe was scared of heights and was not a climber. And she said, quote, there is something we still do not know about what happened, and that's how I feel about it, end quote. And I think this is where some of the conspiracies come in. Joe's mother was insistent he was scared of heights and would not have gone up there. But if we think about it in the Occam's razor way, if he had not slept for 24 hours, maybe he wasn't thinking right. Even just 24 hours of no sleep, you're not making your smartest decisions. I think this is a tragic story of the outdoors. You could be the most in shape, fit person, but nature doesn't care about you and can kill you in an instant. It's very sad it took them so long to find Joe. And this is another story that serves as a reminder to be prepared no matter how in shape or fit you are, no matter how routine the outdoors activities might be. This was a routine run for Joe and Colin. Sure, it was a new place, but it was just supposed to be an hour-long run. And what was supposed to be an hour-long run turned into almost an entire year of Joe's family facing heartache that Joe was missing in the woods. I hope Joe is able to find peace, and I'm glad that his family has answers. As always, recreate responsibly, and remember, sometimes the great outdoors aren't always great. Thanks for listening to Morbid Outdoors. If you're enjoying what you're hearing, make sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform. It's free, easy, and it helps us out immensely. When you subscribe, you get updates on our latest episodes, and it also boosts our visibility, making it easier for other curious souls to find us. Another great way to support Morbid Outdoors is by leaving us a review. Whether you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen, a quick review helps us know what you love about the show. Find us on Instagram and Facebook at Morbid Outdoors Podcast. You can email us case suggestions and your campfire stories at morbidoutdoorspodcast@gmail.com. Thanks so much for the support, and I'll see you next time.